Please don't take my dog. He's all I have. Daniel Thornton wasn't the kind of man who paid attention to the things that didn't matter. His empire, his wealth, those were the things that gave him power. But when he drove past that alley on Christmas Eve, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. A woman holding her dog close, shivering in the cold. That simple plea made him pause. What was it about this moment that felt different? "Don't take my dog. He's all I have left," she said quietly. Well, Daniel couldn't walk away, not this time. But what happened next would change everything he thought he knew about success and happiness. If you're curious how this all turns out, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I'll be sharing more stories just like this. Daniel, the CEO known for his high-rise empire and calculated decisions, had never imagined himself in a situation like this, helping a stranger. But standing in the bitter cold, watching the woman and her dog cling to each other for warmth, he felt a tug at something long buried. His life had been a cycle of business meetings, boardrooms, and charity galas. But none of it mattered. Not after losing Anna, the love of his life. Not after their daughter had passed away so suddenly, leaving him alone in a world he no longer understood. And now, here was a woman, Clara, as he would soon learn, who had lost everything. Her job, her home, and her family. All she had left was Luna. As the woman's eyes met his, fear and exhaustion danced behind her gaze. She had no idea who this man was or what he was doing standing before her. But in that moment, Daniel's mind was made up. He couldn't just walk away. He couldn't just leave her on the streets. There had to be more to life than power and wealth. There had to be a reason for this unexpected encounter. Daniel knelt beside Clara, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not here to take him," he said softly, looking at Luna, who was trembling in her arms. "I'm here to help." And that's how it all started. Clara's eyes widened, but she didn't let go of Luna. Instead, she pulled the dog closer, her thin frame shuddering from the cold, and her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you help me?" she asked, her words coming out as a broken plea, tangled with fear. Daniel hesitated for a moment, taken aback by the rawness of her question. It was a question that reflected more than just the confusion of a homeless woman. It was a question born from months, maybe even years, of rejection, of being left to fend for herself in a world that had long stopped caring. A world where a woman like her had no place. "Because you shouldn't be here," Daniel said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. "Neither of you should be." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Clara's gaze flickered from his eyes to the ground, and she bit her lip as if to stop herself from crying. Luna whimpered softly in her arms, pressing her small face into Clara's chest. Clara stroked the dog's fur, her hand trembling. Daniel didn't move. He simply stayed on his knees, watching her, letting the silence stretch between them. He wanted to say more, something to ease the hurt, the pain he could feel radiating from her. But the words wouldn't come. It was as if, in that moment, the weight of her despair had settled into his own chest. Finally, Clara spoke again, her voice quieter, more fragile. "I don't trust people. I've trusted before, and it didn't turn out well." Daniel's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. He was beginning to understand. Whatever had happened to Clara had left deep scars, physical and emotional scars that could not be erased with a few words or a charitable gesture. "I know," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to trust me. Just let me help. I won't ask for anything in return." Her eyes flickered up to meet his. There was still a wariness in her gaze. But something else, too. A glimmer of hope, perhaps. Maybe, just maybe, she could believe that this wasn't just another lie. Another false promise. Clara let out a shaky breath and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Daniel stood up and offered his hand. Clara hesitated, but after a long moment, she took it, allowing him to help her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, and for a second, it seemed like she might collapse. But Luna's weight in her arms seemed to ground her. The dog, still trembling, nestled her face into Clara's neck as if seeking reassurance. Daniel took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Let's get you both out of here. I have a car waiting." The night air was biting, but with the warmth of Daniel's coat around her, Clara felt a strange sense of comfort. Not warmth from the cold, but from the simple act of kindness. She had never expected it. Never thought she'd find someone like Daniel out here in the streets. Men like him, she assumed, only lived in their high-rise offices or penthouses, oblivious to the struggles of people like her. But Daniel was different. He had stopped, not to offer a few coins or a meaningless word of pity, but to offer real help. As Daniel led Clara to the car, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, her pale, gaunt face, her unkempt hair, her worn-out clothes. She hardly recognized herself. The person she used to be, the woman who once had dreams, a career, and a family, felt like a distant memory. All that remained was a shell holding on to Luna, the one constant in her life. "Where are we going?" Clara asked, her voice tentative as she climbed into the back seat of the car. Luna, still held close in her arms, let out a soft whimper as the warmth of the car began to sink in. "To my place," Daniel replied as he slid into the front seat. "It's not far. Just a place to rest and get warm. You and Luna are safe for tonight." Clara's heart fluttered nervously in her chest, safe. It had been so long since she had felt truly safe. Even before everything fell apart, she had never known real safety. Her life had always been a string of temporary shelters, transient homes, never a place where she could truly belong. But as the car pulled away from the alley and into the quiet streets, Clara allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to have a place to call her own, even for just a night. The drive was short, and soon, the car pulled up to a sleek, modern building that seemed to reach into the sky, surrounded by glass windows and steel beams. The city lights glittered around it, casting a soft glow on the streets below. Daniel got out first, and then opened Clara's door, helping her step out. "Welcome," he said softly. "This is where I live. Don't worry, no one will bother you here. Come on." Clara glanced up at the building, a nervous flutter rising in her stomach. She had never been in a place like this before. The kind of place where people lived in luxury, while she was used to the cold concrete of the streets. Still, there was something about the invitation that felt genuine. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a quiet, simple offer to rest. Daniel led her inside, and the warmth of the lobby hit her like a wave. She almost sighed in relief, but held herself back. It had been so long since she'd felt anything close to comfort. She followed him into an elevator, which whisked them up to the top floor. When the doors opened, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The apartment was massive, more like a modern mansion. The walls were adorned with abstract paintings, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city. A fire crackled softly in a large stone fireplace, its light dancing across the room. Everything was pristine, clean, orderly, and perfect. "This is yours?" Clara asked in disbelief. Daniel smiled. "It's just a place to live," he said. "Not much different than anyone else's home, really." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that it was so much more than that. She had spent the last few weeks scraping by, barely surviving, and now she was standing in the home of a billionaire who had everything. Everything except peace. "Make yourself at home," Daniel said, motioning toward the couch. "I'll get you something to drink." Clara hesitated, still feeling out of place. But then Luna let out a small bark, and Clara instinctively sank onto the couch, cradling her dog. The fire's warmth settled over her, and she finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Maybe, just maybe, tonight wouldn't be like all the others. Maybe for the first time in so long, she would sleep without worrying about where she'd wake up in the morning. Daniel returned with 2 mugs of steaming hot chocolate, handing one to Clara. She took it gratefully, the warmth of the drink settling in her hands. As she looked up at him, something in her shifted. He wasn't asking for anything in return. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just offering her kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to thank me," Daniel replied, his voice soft but sincere. "You're safe here." Clara's eyes began to sting, and she quickly blinked back the tears. She didn't want to cry, not in front of him, not after all the walls she had built up around herself. But for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. "You don't know what this means to me," she murmured. Daniel nodded, sitting down across from her. "I think I have some idea." The silence between them was comfortable, and for the first time in a long while, Clara didn't feel so alone. As the night wore on, Clara felt the weight of exhaustion pull at her. She hadn't slept properly in days, and the warmth of the room, the quiet of the night, and the steady rhythm of Luna's breathing lulled her into a peaceful daze. She looked at Daniel, who was quietly reading a book, his focus unwavering. For a moment, she wondered about him, this man who had so much, yet seemed to be missing something too. She wondered what had brought him to the place he was now, what pain he had endured to make him stop and offer help to someone like her. Before she knew it, her eyes fluttered closed, and sleep finally claimed her. And for the first time in months, Clara felt safe. Clara woke to the smell of pancakes. It was a simple, comforting scent, and it made her smile without even realizing it. Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. The warmth of the blankets wrapped around her was unlike anything she had felt in months, maybe even years. It was soft, like a cocoon, and the crackling sound of the fire in the background was the only sound in the room. She stretched, her body stiff from the uncomfortable night spent on the streets, but the familiar weight of Luna beside her on the couch brought a sense of peace. The dog was curled up next to her, still asleep, her small body rising and falling with each breath. Clara smiled at her furry companion, grateful once again for the simple but unbreakable bond they shared. Luna was her anchor in a world that had turned upside down, and despite everything, she couldn't imagine life without her. The scent of pancakes grew stronger, and Clara's stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, weeks, maybe, and she realized just how hungry she truly was. Her heart twisted with guilt at the thought of taking from someone like Daniel. But at the same time, there was something comforting about his presence. He had given her so much already, even without asking for anything in return. She stood up slowly, stretching her arms above her head and letting out a soft sigh. Luna stirred at the movement, her ears perking up, but the dog didn't get up. Clara chuckled softly and made her way toward the kitchen. Daniel was there, standing by the stove, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. The kitchen was bright and modern, with sleek countertops and high-end appliances. Nothing like the cramped, outdated kitchen she used to have before everything fell apart. The smell of cooking food filled the space, making her feel like she was stepping into a world she had forgotten even existed. The world where things like this, simple kindness, comfort, warmth, were still possible. "Good morning," Daniel said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile. His dark hair was messy, and he had an apron tied around his waist. The image of a billionaire CEO, dressed in casual clothes and cooking breakfast, was almost surreal to Clara. It was a stark contrast to the man she had first met, the man who had seemed so distant and unreachable. "Morning?" Clara replied, her voice still groggy with sleep. She stepped closer to the kitchen island, eyeing the pancakes as they began to pile up. Daniel was making them by the dozen, a plate already full beside the stove. He handed her a warm plate, the pancakes stacked high, golden and fluffy. "Here," he said, his voice soft. "Thought you might be hungry." Clara hesitated for a moment, looking at the pancakes, then back at him. "I don't want to take too much," she said quietly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. It was hard to accept kindness after so long without it, especially from someone who had everything she had lost. Daniel gave her a knowing smile, one that seemed to reach his eyes. "You're not taking too much. You deserve this." It was simple, but those words made her heart flutter. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt a warmth that went beyond the physical. It was the warmth of being seen, of not being forgotten. And it felt like a small victory over everything she had been through. She sat down at the island, picking up her fork and taking a bite. The pancakes were perfectly fluffy, buttery, and sweet. She closed her eyes, savoring the flavor, and for a moment, she could almost forget the world outside. It was easy to get lost in the comfort of this place, in the simplicity of a good meal and the promise of safety. As she ate, Daniel sat across from her, sipping his coffee in silence. The tension from the night before had dissipated, but there was still a certain wariness in Clara's eyes. She wasn't ready to let her guard down completely, not yet. She had lived too long in a world where kindness was either fleeting or had an agenda attached to it. "So," Daniel began after a few moments of quiet, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "Tell me more about yourself, Clara." Clara paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. She wasn't sure how to answer. What was there to tell? The woman who had once been an artist, a wife, a mother? She wasn't that woman anymore. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. I used to be an artist," Clara said slowly, setting her fork down. The words felt heavy on her tongue, as if they belonged to someone else. "I had a studio in Brooklyn. I was doing well. Then, well, everything fell apart." Daniel's gaze softened. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. Clara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "It's not your fault," she said, though the words felt hollow. "My husband died, and after that, everything just went downhill. I lost my job, my apartment, and eventually, I ended up here." Her voice trailed off as she finished the sentence, her eyes dropping to the plate in front of her. Daniel didn't speak for a moment, just letting her words hang in the air. He could sense the pain behind her words, the years of suffering that Clara had gone through in silence. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt a twinge of guilt. He had built his empire on the backs of people like her, and he had never stopped to consider what his decisions had done to their lives. "Clara," Daniel said after a long pause, his voice firm yet gentle, "you don't have to carry this alone anymore. You don't have to hide from the world. You're welcome here, for as long as you need." Clara met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't sure how to respond to that. How could she trust him after everything she had been through? How could she trust anyone? But as she looked at him, standing there with the sincerity in his eyes, something shifted inside her. She could see the depth of his own pain, the quiet sorrow that lived behind his powerful exterior. Maybe they weren't so different after all. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not sure how to accept all this, but thank you." Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. "You don't need to thank me, just let me help." Later that day, after Clara had taken a much-needed nap and Luna had spent some time playing in the apartment, Daniel sat down with her on the couch. He had been thinking about what she said earlier, about her art, her lost career, and he felt a pull to do something more. He had to help her find a way back to who she once was, even if it was just a small part of it. "I think you should start painting again," Daniel said quietly, breaking the silence between them. Clara looked at him, surprised. "What?" "I know it's been a long time, but you were an artist. You still are, Clara. That's a part of who you are. You don't need to lose that just because of what's happened." Clara swallowed hard, her emotions welling up. She hadn't painted in so long that it almost seemed impossible. The thought of picking up a brush again, of creating something beautiful when her world felt broken, was daunting. But Daniel was right. Art had been a part of her before everything fell apart. Maybe it could help her heal now. I don't know if I can," Clara said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You can," Daniel said confidently, looking her in the eyes. "And I'll help you. You're not alone in this." By the time the evening rolled around, Clara had made her decision. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. Daniel had given her something she hadn't had in a long time. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the apartment. Clara stretched, feeling the first signs of hope stir within her. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't wake up to a nightmare of uncertainty. She woke up in a space that felt safe, safe enough to let down her guard, just a little. She looked at Luna, curled up on the couch beside her, and smiled. The dog was the one constant in her life, the one thing she could trust. And now, with Daniel's help, maybe, just maybe, she could start trusting herself again. Clara got up from the couch, careful not to disturb Luna, and wandered into the kitchen. She had a lot to think about. Daniel had offered to help her start painting again, and as impossible as it felt, she knew it was a chance she couldn't afford to pass up. She needed something to cling to, something that reminded her of who she once was before life had torn her apart. Just as she was about to open the fridge, she heard footsteps approaching. Daniel appeared in the doorway, looking more relaxed than she had seen him so far. His black sweater was slightly wrinkled from a night spent on the couch, his hair tousled, and his face free of the usual cold, calculating mask that he wore in his corporate world. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm, but there was an edge of concern in his tone. "Morning," Clara replied, turning to face him. "I was just thinking about the painting. I want to try. I'm not sure where to start, though." Daniel smiled, the faintest hint of pride crossing his face. "That's the first step. I'll help you set up a space in here. We can start slow. Just a few sketches to get your mind back in the right place. No pressure." Clara nodded, feeling a flicker of excitement at the thought. She hadn't picked up a brush in years. But there was something about Daniel's offer, his belief in her, that made her feel like she could do it. Maybe she could reclaim a piece of herself. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You really don't have to do this." "You don't have to thank me," Daniel replied, his smile kind. "You deserve to have a future, one where you get to do what makes you happy." Clara glanced down at Luna, who had woken up and was looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said something like that to her. Not without an agenda, not with strings attached. The moment was interrupted by the chime of Daniel's phone, the soft vibration breaking the bubble of quiet they had settled into. He looked down at it for a moment, then frowned. "I have to take this," he said, his voice more serious now. Clara nodded, giving him space as he stepped into the hallway. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering nerves inside her. The thought of painting again, of reclaiming a part of her past, was both thrilling and terrifying. But she knew she had to try. For Luna, for herself, for the life she wanted to build. She was lost in her thoughts when Daniel returned, his face slightly more tense than before. "That was my assistant," he said, his brow furrowed. "I've got a few things to take care of today, but I won't be gone long. Is that all right?" Clara nodded, understanding. He had a life outside of her, one that she couldn't interfere with. She appreciated that he had given her the space she needed to start healing, but she knew better than to expect everything to stop for her. "Of course. Go ahead." "I'll be fine here," she said, her voice steady, though a little part of her wished he didn't have to leave. It was a strange thing, feeling safe enough to want someone to stay, but not quite trusting herself to ask for it. Daniel was gone for a few hours, leaving Clara to her own devices. She took the time to unpack a few of the old art supplies she had brought with her, setting up a corner of the apartment as a makeshift studio. It was a humble space, just a small area by the window, but it felt like the start of something new. She stared at the blank canvas for a long time, unsure where to begin. The weight of her past, her lost career, her failed marriage, pressed heavily on her shoulders. But there was something in her that refused to give up. A quiet, persistent voice telling her that she wasn't done yet. After a while, Clara picked up a pencil and began sketching. The first few lines were shaky, uneven. But as she continued, her confidence grew. She didn't know what the final piece would look like, but that was okay. She had to start somewhere. When Daniel returned, he found Clara still at the canvas, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sketch was far from perfect, but it was a start. The lines were raw and expressive, a reflection of the emotions she had been holding back for so long. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was something real. Something that came from a place inside her she had buried for years. "I see you've started," Daniel said, his voice gentle as he stood at the door, watching her work. Clara looked up at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. I didn't know where to begin. But this feels right. Even if it's just a few lines." Daniel nodded, stepping closer to the canvas. "You're doing great. Art isn't about perfection. It's about expression. And you're letting yourself feel again, Clara. That's what matters. Her heart swelled at his words. They weren't just empty compliments. They were truths. And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt seen. She wasn't just some woman who had lost everything. She was an artist again. And that meant something. As the days passed, Clara continued to paint, finding solace in the act of creation. It wasn't always easy. Some days, the brushstrokes felt forced, and the images she wanted to bring to life seemed just out of reach. But every day, she grew a little stronger. Every day, she let more of her past go, and with it, more of the fear that had kept her locked in a cycle of survival. Daniel remained a steady presence in her life, his support unwavering. He didn't rush her. He didn't push her to do more than she was ready for. But he was there, in the background, quietly helping her rebuild the pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. One evening, after Clara had finished working on her latest piece, she found herself sitting with Daniel in the living room, the fire crackling softly between them. Luna was curled up at her feet, asleep, and Clara felt the weight of the day lift off her shoulders. "You've made incredible progress," Daniel said, his voice soft but sincere. Clara shrugged, a modest smile crossing her face. "It's just a start. I'm not where I want to be yet." "You will be," Daniel replied, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "You've already come so far." The silence between them was comfortable, and Clara found herself grateful for the peace that had settled in her life. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was constantly running away from something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. The days passed quickly, each one blending into the next. Clara found herself settling into a rhythm in Daniel's apartment. Every morning she would wake up with a quiet sense of peace, knowing that she had a place to rest, a place where she could be herself. No pretense, no walls. Daniel was always there, offering his support without hesitation, but he never pushed. He had given her space to heal in her own time. It wasn't just the art that helped her reclaim a sense of herself. It was the little things too. The shared meals, the conversations that went late into the night, the way Daniel listened, really listened, when she spoke about her past, her fears, her hopes. He wasn't just a billionaire CEO who had everything he could ever want. He was someone who understood loss, understood what it meant to feel hollow even in a world full of riches. And maybe that was what kept drawing Clara to him. Not his wealth, not the luxury that surrounded him, but the quiet understanding that passed between them. It was late one afternoon when Clara received an unexpected message. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down at the screen. A text from her old friend, Sarah, who had once worked with her in the art studio before everything fell apart. Sarah. "Hey, Clara. I heard about your situation. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. If you ever feel ready, I'd love to help you get back into the art scene. I know a few galleries that might be interested in showcasing your work. Let me know if you want to talk." Clara stared at the message for a long moment, her heart pounding. This was the first time someone from her old life had reached out. Someone who knew her as the artist she once was. It was a lifeline, a thread to her former self that she hadn't expected to find. For so long, she had felt invisible, lost in the mess of her life. But this message made her feel seen again. Daniel walked into the room just as Clara was reading the text again, her heart still racing. He paused when he saw her expression. "Everything all right?" Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide. Sarah just texted me," Daniel stepped closer, sensing the weight of the moment. And? She wants to help me get back into the art scene, Clara said, her voice thick with disbelief. She knows some galleries, and she's offering to help me get my work shown again. It feels surreal. Daniel's face softened with a quiet smile. Clara, that's amazing. You've worked hard to get here. You deserve this. Clara shook her head, still processing the message. But it feels so sudden. What if they don't like my work anymore? What if they think I've lost it? Daniel kneeled in front of her, his eyes serious yet gentle. You're still the same artist, Clara. You've just been through a lot. You're rediscovering who you are, and that's what matters. Don't let the fear of failure stop you from taking this step. Clara swallowed hard, the knot in her throat tightening. She had been running for so long, running from failure, running from the pain. But maybe Daniel was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. The next morning, Clara took a deep breath and reached out to Sarah. She agreed to meet her at the small cafe Sarah had suggested, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. When she arrived, Sarah was already waiting, a warm smile on her face. Clara, I'm so glad you came. She rose to hug her, and for a brief moment, Clara felt like she was stepping back into her old life, the life she had left behind so abruptly. They sat down at a quiet table, and Sarah wasted no time. I know things have been tough for you, but I believe in your work. I always have. I think there's still a place for you in the art world, Clara. It's not too late. Clara listened, nodding slowly. I don't even know where to begin, she admitted. Everything's changed, and I don't know if I'm the same artist anymore. Sarah smiled softly. It's okay. You don't have to be the same. You've grown, Clara. You've experienced so much, and that will come through in your art. People will see that. But first, let's focus on what you want. What do you feel inspired to create now? Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question sink in. What did she want to create? The answer didn't come right away, but as she thought about it, a flicker of inspiration sparked inside her. A flicker she hadn't felt in years. She didn't have to force it. She didn't have to return to the way things were. She just needed to create from where she was now. I think I want to paint something that reflects this journey I've been on, Clara said slowly, her voice gaining strength. Something that shows the struggle, but also the hope. I want to show how far I've come, even if it's just a small step. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's exactly what you should do. That's where the magic is. Capturing the rawness of where you've been and where you're going. Clara smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt excited about the future. She wasn't sure how things would unfold, but she knew one thing. She was no longer afraid of trying. In the days that followed, Clara threw herself into her work. Daniel continued to support her, never pushing but always offering encouragement when she needed it. He would bring her coffee in the mornings, check in on her progress, and sometimes just sit with her in silence while she worked. It wasn't about fixing her. It was about being there, letting her take the time she needed. As she began to paint again, Clara found herself rediscovering parts of herself she had forgotten. The brushstrokes were no longer forced, no longer about trying to please someone else. They were about her, about reclaiming her voice. Each piece she created was a step toward healing, a step toward rediscovering the woman she had once been. One evening, after Clara had completed her first new painting, a piece filled with vibrant colors and swirling lines that symbolized her journey through darkness into light, she felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. It was the first real expression of herself since she had lost everything. That night, as Clara stood back to admire her work, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Daniel standing behind her, his face soft with admiration. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "It's beautiful." Clara smiled, the weight of her past finally starting to lift. "It's just the beginning." Daniel nodded. "And I'm proud of you, more than you know." For a moment, the silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding. Clara realized then that she didn't have to do this alone. She had a future, one that was hers to create. And no matter where it took her, she wouldn't have to face it in the dark anymore. The days grew warmer as spring approached. But for Clara, the warmth was more than just the change in the weather. The last few weeks had been filled with a new sense of purpose, a renewed spark of energy that she hadn't felt in years. Her art, once a distant memory, had become the center of her life again. The hours spent in front of the canvas no longer felt like an exhausting chore, but rather a chance to reconnect with herself. And yet, as her art grew stronger, so did the bond between her and Daniel. The connection they shared was undeniable, but it was more than just the comfort of being in a safe space. It was something deeper, something that Clara hadn't been ready to admit to herself. Every evening, after a long day of painting, Clara would join Daniel on the couch by the fire. They would talk about life, about the future, and about the unexpected path they had both found themselves on. Daniel was easy to talk to, and Clara found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone in a long time. He didn't push her, didn't ask for anything in return. He just listened. It was on one of those evenings, as they sat together with Luna curled at their feet, that the conversation shifted. "You know," Daniel began, his voice more serious than usual, "I've been thinking a lot about this place, about my life and what I'm doing with it." Clara looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" "I've been helping you get back on your feet," he said, his voice low. "But I haven't been taking the time to really look at what I'm doing with my own life. I've spent so much time building this empire, this image of success. But I'm still lost." He paused, the weight of his words sinking in. "I've been helping you find your way, but I don't know if I've been helping myself." Clara stayed quiet for a moment, sensing the depth of his words. She had always known that Daniel's wealth hadn't protected him from his own struggles. She had seen the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his late wife, Anna, and the empty space he carried inside him. But this was different. This was Daniel admitting something he had clearly never spoken aloud before. "You don't have to have everything figured out," Clara said quietly, her voice gentle. "You're allowed to be lost, too." Daniel turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. There was a vulnerability there that Clara hadn't seen before, a rawness that made her heart ache. For so long, Daniel had been the strong one, the one who seemed to have it all under control. But now, in this moment, he was just a man, just like her, trying to make sense of the chaos of life. "I've been so focused on everything," Daniel continued, his voice strained. "On making the right decisions, on keeping everything in order, that I forgot what it means to really live. I forgot what it means to feel." Clara took a deep breath, her own heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had spent years burying her own feelings, running from her own pain. And now, here was Daniel, someone who had everything she thought she wanted, admitting that he too had been running. "It's okay to feel," Clara said, her voice soft but firm. "It's okay to let yourself be vulnerable. We're all just trying to figure it out." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if the world had stopped spinning, leaving only the quiet hum of the fire and the weight of their shared truth. "I don't know what I'm doing with my life, Clara," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want anymore." Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand on his. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed him to know that he wasn't alone. "I think I figured out what I want," Clara said quietly, her heart pounding in her chest. "I want to keep painting. I want to keep creating. And I want to help others find their way too. I want to give people the same chance I've been given." Daniel looked at her, his eyes softening. "I think you're already doing that," he said. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle into her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path, not just with her art, but with her life. She wasn't lost anymore. She was finding her way, one brushstroke at a time. But there was still a part of her that felt something deeper when she looked at Daniel. A part of her that couldn't deny the growing feelings she had for him. She had tried to keep them buried, tried to focus on herself and her art. But every time their eyes met, something stirred inside her. A connection, undeniable and real. That night, as Clara worked on her latest piece, a large canvas filled with swirling colors and bold brushstrokes, she found herself thinking about Daniel more than she had ever allowed herself to. She was starting to see him differently, not just as the billionaire who had given her a second chance, but as a man who had his own demons, his own struggles. A man who was just as lost as she had been. And for the first time in months, she wondered if she could let herself feel something more than just gratitude for him. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself love again. The next few days passed in a blur of art, inspiration, and quiet moments shared between Clara and Daniel. The connection between them deepened, but neither of them spoke of it aloud. Clara focused on her painting, pouring her heart into every stroke, while Daniel threw himself into his work as well. But there was something different in the way he approached it now. He was starting to let go of his rigid control, beginning to allow himself the space to feel, to experience life rather than just exist in it. One evening, as Clara added the finishing touches to her latest piece, Daniel came into the room, his expression more serious than usual. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what you said the other night. About how you want to help people. I think I can help with that." Clara looked up from her canvas, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Daniel took a step closer, his gaze steady. "I've been thinking about how we can combine what you do with what I do. Your art, your vision. It's powerful. I want to help you reach people with it. Maybe we can start a program, a gallery to help struggling artists. Something that gives people like you a chance. Something that helps others find their way, just like you're finding yours." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined something like this. She had dreamed of her art reaching the world, of her work making an impact. But this? This was more than she had ever hoped for. "Do you think it's possible?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded. "I do. I think it's time we both stopped running and started living. Together." The days that followed Daniel's offer felt like a turning point for Clara. She had never allowed herself to imagine a future like this. A future where her art, her passion, could truly make a difference. The idea of working alongside Daniel, of combining her creative vision with his resources, filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. But with that hope came something else. Fear. The fear of failure, of making a mistake, of losing what she was beginning to believe was a chance at redemption. She spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity, sketching new designs, working on her current piece, and mentally preparing for the next step. Yet, despite the excitement, the nagging sense of doubt remained in the back of her mind. Could she really do this? Could she truly step back into the art world, a world that had left her behind? It wasn't until one quiet evening, when Clara was alone in her studio, staring at a blank canvas, that the weight of her past truly hit her. The reality of everything she had lost, her career, her marriage, her sense of identity, came crashing down. The memories flooded in, as they always did. The late nights working in her studio, the joy of creating something that was entirely hers, the warmth of her husband's presence as they talked about their future. But then came the betrayal. The way her ex-husband, Ethan, had become distant, cold, and eventually completely absent. And the day she found out he had been having an affair, a revelation that shattered everything she had believed in. And after that, there had been the job loss, the financial strain, the crushing isolation, the spiral that led to the streets, the days spent hiding behind a mask of survival, never once allowing herself to break. Not until she met Daniel. The pain of those memories clung to her like a second skin, one that she had never quite been able to shed. Even though she was in a new place now, even though she was surrounded by people who cared, those memories still held a tight grip on her heart. That night, as Clara lay awake in the guest room of Daniel's penthouse, she felt the weight of everything she had been running from. And she realized, with a painful clarity, that she had never truly confronted her past. She had never given herself the chance to mourn the life she had lost, the life she had once cherished. The next morning, Clara woke with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew what she had to do. If she was going to move forward, she had to face the things she had buried deep inside. She had to confront the demons from her past. She found Daniel in the kitchen, preparing coffee. He looked up as she entered, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Good morning," he said, offering her a mug of coffee. "How are you today?" Clara took the mug, her fingers brushing against his as she did. She looked at him for a moment, her thoughts swirling. "I need to do something," she said softly. "I need to face my past before I can move forward." Daniel raised an eyebrow, concern flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" Clara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've been running from it. Running from everything. My ex-husband, my failed career, the way I lost myself. I've been so focused on starting over, on building something new, that I haven't given myself the chance to heal from the things that broke me." Daniel set the coffee pot down and walked over to her, his presence warm and steady. "Clara, you don't have to do it alone. I'm here." Clara looked up at him, her eyes filled with vulnerability. "I know. But I have to do this for me. I have to face it, so I can let it go." Daniel nodded, his expression softening. "Then I'll be here to support you, no matter what. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Clara smiled, the first real smile she had felt in days. "Thank you. That means everything to me." That afternoon, Clara made the decision to visit the place where it all began, her old art studio. It was the one place she hadn't been able to bring herself to return to, not since everything fell apart. But now, with Daniel's encouragement, she felt like she could face it. The studio, though empty and silent, held the ghosts of her past. It was where she had built her dreams, where she had felt invincible. But it was also where the first cracks in her life appeared. Daniel offered to drive her, but Clara insisted on going alone. She needed to do this on her own terms, without any distractions. The drive was long, but it gave her time to think. She wasn't sure what she would find when she arrived, but she knew she couldn't keep running from it. As she pulled up in front of the building, Clara's heart began to race. The building looked the same as it had the last time she saw it. Old, with peeling paint and a faded sign above the door. The memories came flooding back, unbidden, as she stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The door creaked as she opened it, and the familiar smell of paint, canvas, and wood hit her like a wave. The space was empty now. No paintings, no supplies. Just the remnants of the life she had once lived. She stepped inside, taking in the silence. Everything seemed so much smaller now. The walls, once filled with vibrant artwork, now stood bare, like a reflection of the emptiness she had felt in her heart for so long. Clara walked to the far corner of the studio, where she had spent hours working, lost in the art that gave her life meaning. The easel was still there, covered in dust, but it was no longer the centerpiece of her world. It was a relic of a past she had tried to forget. For a moment, Clara simply stood there, her mind swirling with emotions. She had put so much of herself into this place, and now it was just a hollow shell of what it used to be. But as she looked around, something shifted inside her. The anger, the hurt, the resentment, all of it began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of acceptance. "This place doesn't own me anymore," Clara whispered to herself. She took a deep breath and walked out, her steps lighter than they had been when she arrived. The past was behind her now, and she was ready to move forward. When Clara returned to the apartment, Daniel was waiting for her, his concern evident in his eyes. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Clara smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "It went well. I think I'm finally ready to let go." Daniel smiled back, his expression softening. "I'm proud of you." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude she couldn't put into words. She wasn't the same person she had been when she arrived here. She wasn't the same woman who had walked through the door that first night, lost and broken. She was stronger now, more whole, and for the first time in a long time, she believed that she had a future, one that was hers to create. The city outside the penthouse was alive with movement, busy, bustling, and brimming with possibility. But inside the apartment, there was a different kind of stillness, one that Clara had come to appreciate over the past few months. The quiet of the mornings, the soft hum of the coffee maker, the warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth, it was a peace she had never known before. It was the kind of peace she thought she had lost forever. Clara stood by the window, gazing out over the city below. The skyscrapers stretched toward the sky, their reflections shimmering in the glass. But in her heart, she was focused on something more personal: her art, her future, and the life she had begun to rebuild. There were still moments of doubt, of course. the fear that she would fall back into the same cycle of self-doubt that had defined her for so long. But with each passing day, she grew stronger. The woman who had once believed she was nothing more than a failure was now beginning to believe that she was worthy of a future, one that she could build on her own terms. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, his eyes soft with concern and warmth. "You're up early," he said, his voice gentle as if sensing the quiet reflection that was taking place inside her. Clara smiled, though it was tinged with a touch of sadness. "Just thinking," she replied. "About everything." Daniel walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Clara chuckled softly, her gaze still on the view outside. "I think it's a good thing. It's just, there's a lot to process. So much has changed in such a short time." Daniel nodded, stepping closer. "I know the feeling," he said, his voice low. "It's not easy, but I think we're both on the right path now." Clara turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. There was a vulnerability in his gaze that she hadn't noticed before. A quiet sadness, but also a quiet hope. She realized then that their paths, once so separate, had now become intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted. "I don't know what the future holds," Clara said softly. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything that's coming. But I do know one thing. I don't want to do it alone." Daniel reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You're not alone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You never have been." Clara felt a lump form in her throat as she looked up at him. There was so much left unsaid between them. But in this moment, they didn't need words. There was a connection between them, one that had grown slowly but surely. It wasn't about rescuing her or fixing her. It was about two people finding their way through life's challenges side by side. "Daniel," Clara began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how to explain it, but these last few months, they've changed me. They've made me realize that there's more to life than just surviving. And I want to live. I want to create, to love, to take chances." Daniel's hand remained on her cheek, his thumb gently brushing against her skin. "And I want that for you, too," he said, his voice steady and full of sincerity. "But I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. I'm here, Clara, for whatever comes next." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so long hiding from her feelings, pushing them away, convinced that they would only lead to pain. But now, standing here with Daniel, she realized that sometimes the greatest risk was allowing herself to feel, allowing herself to embrace the future with open arms. "I don't know what the next step is," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I know I want to take it with you." Daniel smiled, the warmth of his gaze settling into her chest like a steady heartbeat. "Then let's take it together." The days that followed were filled with new beginnings. Clara dove into her art with a renewed sense of purpose, working on pieces that were more expressive and raw than anything she had created before. The walls that had once confined her, that had held her back from truly exploring her talent, began to crumble as she found herself painting with a freedom she hadn't known since her earliest days as an artist. And all the while, Daniel was there, supporting her, encouraging her, and offering his guidance when needed. They worked side by side, but their connection was no longer defined by the boundaries of business or obligation. It was about mutual respect, shared dreams, and the unspoken understanding that they were both on a journey of healing, of rediscovery. But as much as Clara thrived in her art, there was another part of her that was beginning to surface. The part of her that had long buried her heart out of fear. She had always been afraid of falling in love again, afraid of trusting someone with her heart after everything she had been through. But in Daniel's presence, that fear began to dissipate. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara found herself sitting on the couch, her sketchbook open in her lap. She had just finished a new piece, a large canvas filled with swirling colors and shapes that seemed to capture the emotions she had been feeling. It was raw, messy, but it was hers. Daniel entered the room, his usual calm presence settling into the space between them. He walked over to her, his eyes scanning the canvas before landing on her face. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Clara smiled, her heart fluttering. "It's not finished," she replied, "but I think it's getting there." He sat down beside her, his gaze never leaving the painting. For a long time, neither of them spoke. It was as if they didn't need to say anything. Their presence was enough. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice low. "Clara," he began, his tone filled with a tenderness she hadn't heard before. "I don't know what I would have done without you these past few months. You've helped me find something in myself I didn't even know I was missing." Clara's breath caught in her throat, and she turned to face him. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a soft, almost wistful smile. "I've spent my life building things, empires, companies, wealth. But none of it ever felt as important as what I've found with you. You've shown me what it means to really live, to really feel." Clara's heart raced as she looked at him, seeing him in a new light. She had always known there was more to Daniel than the CEO persona he projected. But hearing him speak so openly, so vulnerably, made her realize just how deeply he had changed. "I feel the same way," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. I never thought I'd let myself fall in love with anyone." Daniel took her hand in his touch warm and steady. "Clara, I don't need you to have everything figured out. I just need you. And I want you to know that I'll be here no matter what comes next. Together, we can build something real." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she looked at him, the weight of his words sinking deep into her heart. This was what she had been searching for all along. Someone who saw her, who understood her, and who wanted to walk through life with her, side by side. She squeezed his hand, her voice barely a whisper. "I think I'm ready for that. I'm ready for us." As the weeks turned into months, Clara and Daniel's relationship continued to grow, built on a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and shared dreams. Clara's art took off, with galleries eager to showcase her work, and soon she was able to use her success to give back, helping other struggling artists find their way, just as Daniel had helped her. And together, they built something greater than either of them could have imagined. Not just a partnership, but a life. One that was full of love, vulnerability, and the freedom to be themselves. In each other, they had found more than they ever thought possible. The morning sunlight filtered through the large windows of the penthouse, casting a warm glow across the room. The city below, once a symbol of everything that had once felt so out of reach to Clara, now felt like a world she had become a part of. The familiar hum of the city streets, the rustle of the wind outside. It was all part of the life she had slowly but surely built with Daniel. Today was different, though. Today was the culmination of everything they had worked for, everything they had shared. Today, Daniel and Clara were taking the next step together, not just in their personal lives, but in a way that would forever solidify their partnership. It had started as a simple idea. Daniel's offer to help Clara get her work into the world. But as the months passed, as their connection deepened, that idea had grown into something bigger, something more meaningful. The gallery, the foundation, the programs for struggling artists, those weren't just business ventures. They were a reflection of the love and trust that had developed between them. Clara stood by the window, watching the city wake up. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, but beneath it was the flutter of excitement, the anticipation of what was about to unfold. Today wasn't just about her art. It was about their future together. She turned as she heard footsteps behind her. Daniel stood in the doorway, dressed in a sharp suit, his face soft with a smile. But there was something different about him today. The usual businesslike demeanor had softened, and in its place was a quiet warmth. A man who had allowed himself to love, to be vulnerable. "You look beautiful," Daniel said, his voice warm as he walked over to her. Clara smiled, feeling her heart swell. "So do you," she said softly, looking him up and down. There was no denying the connection between them, no question that what they had was real. But today, on their wedding day, it felt more real than ever. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked, his voice filled with emotion. Clara nodded, her eyes bright. "I am. I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Daniel reached out, taking her hand in his. For a moment, they stood there together, silently. They had both been through so much. Loss, pain, heartache. But they had come out on the other side, stronger and more united than ever. "I've been thinking," Daniel began, breaking the silence. "We've both come so far. But I think this is the start of something even bigger. Not just for us, but for everything we're building together. For the future." Clara smiled softly, her heart full. "I know. I feel it too." Daniel squeezed her hand, his gaze tender. "I want you to know, Clara, that everything I've built for this. For you, for us. For a future where we can create something together. Something that lasts." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "You've already given me everything?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I could love again. Not after everything I've been through. But you're everything I never knew I needed. You've given me back my heart, Daniel. My hope. My future." Daniel stepped closer, his hand resting on her cheek. "You've given me something I never thought I would have again. You've helped me rediscover who I am, what matters. I thought I was living a full life, but I was just surviving. With you, I'm truly living." They stood there in the quiet of the morning, their hearts full of love, their minds full of the future they would build together. They didn't need words to say what they both felt. They had already said it. Every time their eyes met, every time they held hands, every time they simply existed together. The ceremony was small but intimate, held in a beautiful garden surrounded by close friends and family. The air was warm, and the sun bathed everything in a soft glow, as if the world itself was celebrating their union. Clara wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair swept back in loose waves. Daniel stood beside her, looking at her with a tenderness that made her heart swell. As they exchanged vows, Clara's hands trembled, but they were steady when she held Daniel's. She had never imagined this day, never thought she would find love again. But here she was, standing beside the man who had not only helped her rebuild her career, but had given her the one thing she had longed for most, a sense of belonging. "I promise to love you," Clara said, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. "To cherish you, to support you, and to walk with you through whatever life brings us. No matter the challenges, the heartache, or the joy, we will face it together. I give you my heart, Daniel, and I give you my future." Daniel's voice was filled with emotion as he replied, "I promise to love you with everything I have, Clara. To protect you, to support you, and to never let you feel alone again. I will walk with you through all that life brings us, and together, we'll build a future full of love, hope, and the kind of life we've both dreamed of." As they exchanged rings, a symbol of their commitment to each other, Clara's heart swelled with joy. This wasn't just a marriage. It was the beginning of something new. Something that would take them both into the future. A future built on trust, on love, and on the shared dreams they had worked so hard to make a reality. The moment their lips met in their first kiss as husband and wife, the world seemed to stop. The cheers of their friends and family faded into the background, and Clara felt as if she were suspended in time. In that kiss, she felt everything. The promise of a life lived fully, the love that had grown between them, and the certainty that this was only the beginning. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, music, and celebration. Clara and Daniel danced together, their movements graceful and synchronized, as if they had been partners in life for much longer than they actually had been. The warmth between them was palpable, and everyone who saw them could feel the love that radiated from their connection. Later, as the night drew to a close, Clara found herself standing on the balcony with Daniel, looking out at the city below. It was quiet now, the hustle of the day replaced with the stillness of the night. "I can't believe we're here," Clara said, her voice soft. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "I can. I always knew we were meant to be. It's just a matter of finding each other in this crazy world." Clara smiled, resting her head against his chest. "I never thought I'd have a love like this. But now, I can't imagine my life without you." "You won't have to," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Because we're in this together. Always." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the city lights twinkled below them. It wasn't the wealth, the success, or the luxury that made their lives complete. It was the love they shared, the trust they had built, and the future they were ready to face together. And in that moment, Clara knew that the richest man in the world wasn't the one with the most money. He was the one who had found love and had the courage to embrace it. Together, they would build a life that no wealth could ever replace. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.